If you are an absolute moon boy, we know your YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit is flooded with the experts making bold calls in the world of finance. Whether they host a finance show like Mad Money or are just a finance guru on TikTok, it is always funny to look back on some of the biggest investing mistakes of all time. Ranking these absolute flop calls is borderline impossible as they all boast ridiculous potential and actual losses. Like Robert Zuccario, the founder of the Golden Eagle Strategies with 40 years of investment management under his belt. He was labeled by the Wall Street Journal as a top 10 fund manager. You would think he would know a thing or two about this money game, especially after 40 years. However, he was also the author of a little book called Dow 30,000 by 2008. The title says it all, published in 2001. It is fair to say that it missed the mark by a little bit. In fact, it missed it so hard that it was in fact the same year that the global financial crisis happened, where it went from hovering around the $12,000 to $14,000 mark all the way down to $8,500. I think it's fair to say that this is probably one call that Bobby wishes he could take back. But a bold call doesn't get any bolder when it comes to experts making calls on technology companies, especially if they're old and couldn't understand or use the technology. Anyway, one of the most controversial companies that invaded and revolutionized an industry to much belief was Netflix. And poor Paulie LaMonica came out in 2003 telling investors to not invest just because it's cool. He deterred newbie investors away from Netflix at the time because Blockbuster was releasing a little service called Film Caddy, and that was basically Blockbuster's answer to Netflix. Around this time as well, bear in mind the very successful Carl Icahn had made a huge investment in Blockbuster around the end of 2004, equating to a $191 million share in the company. Netflix slowly took over each Blockbuster store one by one. The blue store started disappearing with Netflix happily kicking it off the street, and as a result for Icahn, he sold for a grand total loss of $180 million. But let's get back to poor Paulie. He made this call about using caution buying Netflix when the price was hovering around $11 a share. Now sitting at just a smidge over $300 a share, Paulie had deterred many investors that could have moved from the pure degens to the big time ballers. However, if you want to stay on a degen level, then you need to look no further than Jim Cramer. With respect to the man, it is well known that he comes out with some of the most borderline unluckiest, or some might say stupidest calls of all time. It has gotten to the point where social media doesn't hold back on old mate Cramer, and there is now an ETF trading known as the Inverse Cramer ETF. But nonetheless, to top off one of the worst calls that someone has given publicly with his take on Bear Stearns. The story goes like this. A caller called Jim's show Mad Money asking if they should be concerned about Bear Stearns in 2008. On the 11th of March 2008, Cramer claimed that no, Bear Stearns would be fine. Just 6 days later, Bear Stearns went for around $60 a share to opening up on Monday the 17th at a smidge over $3.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I bet Mad Money's phone line basically imploded that day. Much like the phone line of Whitney Tilson. I would have thrown my phone off a bridge after this though. He might have encouraged people to skip one of the biggest IPOs of all time in Google, and instead recommended people buy the IPO of Dell. If only Tilson could look back now and see the damage he has caused. Because Google went from around $36 billion business to now valued at over $1 trillion. And Dell, well, it hasn't even gone past Google's IPO valuation of $36 billion. Yeah, it's fair to say he probably hasn't made too many calls since this. When you become a big dog investor though, you don't even need to shill or share the investments that you've made, as they are all publicly announced and shared in the media, which leads to danger as newbie investors can blindly copy the exact trades the big dogs are doing, which is the exact opposite of everything they teach you at investor school. However, if there is one successful investor that everyone knows about, it is Warren Buffett. Anything that man says or does basically creates millions. Now, I'm going to say something controversial and definitely can't wait to read the comments, but I hope no one was listening to Warren Buffett when he decided to pass on investing in Amazon. Whether Warren couldn't see the potential of tech and the future with Amazon, or just didn't love the idea of hype, Warren would be spewing at missing one of the biggest investing opportunities of all time. And when you think of big companies like Netflix, Google, and Amazon, you think of the once-in-a-lifetime investments that genuinely could take you from the streets to the penthouse. And there's just one more big tech company that you do anything to turn back the clock on to invest, and this would be for Apple. Now, whether you think Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, was being biased or not, he came out and openly said that there is no chance that the iPhone is going to get any market share. And, well, Apple and iPhone did quite the opposite. They came out and have dominated and upheld their mark in the phone industry. I mean, you're basically seen as strange by society if you don't have anything other than an iPhone. I wonder if Steve deep down knew this and bought a cheeky bag of Apple when he first left Microsoft. I guess we'll never know. So if this video is teaching you anything, firstly, you better subscribe and like the video. But secondly, I guess you should take out of this that anything anyone ever says is not guaranteed. There's no free money stock or guaranteed winners, let alone stocks you should even bother Googling. Unless, of course, you have a time machine. But no matter how smart people may seem, everyone's human and everyone gets stuff wrong. Do your own research, be wise, and invest wiser.